Hello Monster Gardeners, welcome back to the Test Lab with me, your host, Dr. Watt. Today I'm going to be wrapping up part 2 of our First Light conversation. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, then it might be a good idea to watch part 1 first. But for those of you that are still here, here's the conclusion to our very first light conversation. Biggest challenges I've found coming as a complete rookie into the lighting game is there is no set standardized approach for any of this. It is the Wild West.
The Wild West.
It's any one for themselves. You know, if you can come up with a good idea, you can make it. I mean, you can look at some of the amazing looking fixtures that have come out. There was one that we got sent called the Grow Beast. It's a monster. It takes 2 people to hang it. It's a DE-HPS and
The lighting manufacturers are being slightly deceitful, and they are preying on trends.
It's almost like it's a marketing thing. You can see which way all of a sudden the sales are going to go.
Can I tell you something?
Can
I tell you, if a lighting company's making more than a handful of products, if they're making 10 products or 20 products, you really have to look at them and ask that question, why? There's not 20 different applications to cultivation. And when I mean applications, I mean, yes, there are very specific applications, but let's admit that if you see a company doing that, they're typically more gimmicky of a brand than a brand that's really investing in research and development and honing in on a design philosophy.
I mean, this is one of the most interesting things in the research for the various episodes of TestLab. Really, the only light I can honestly say, hand on heart, that was designed for horticulture of any kind is DE-HPS. Because it was HPS that was modified to suit growing, whereas everything else, CMH, LED, all of these are luminaire technologies, these are lighting technologies from shopping malls and stuff like that someone said, hey, that spectrum's pretty good, and hey, those outputs numbers are pretty good.
It'll grow plants.
Let's grow plants under there.
You know, when you were looking for the true color of something for LECs.
Right.
It's exactly like you said earlier.
Yep. Well, it's almost like induction fluorescence too. That was an example of preying on a concept. The induction fluorescence we tested at Monster Gardens 5-6 years ago, and we saw it was just a fraction of betterment over a standard T5. That now their bulbs have gotten good enough that there is a comparable difference. They do have spectral manipulation capabilities. They do have replacement of bulbs, but they do have the detachable mercury. But when you really look into it, it doesn't seem to be something that we should be looking at because it's not that much better than the existing fluorescent technology that's out there other than the bulb replacement. But again, we see those bulbs failing more frequently than they should. But it's just an example that there's just so much in the lighting world. There's so much buzz, and people are taking different approaches at trying to attract the customer. And the truth is that there are professional light testing people out there, and they're maybe not folks that work at light laboratories like the company that we use for some of our independent light testing that's more controlled, but they're folks like us that actually go out and test things, and they'll actually use it in gardens and test and do controlled testing themselves, and they'll provide us this information. There are those folks out there, and if you look hard enough, you will find the right information. But if you're looking at a new light, you're looking at to better the existing light that you have, let's talk about that. If you have an HPS, how much betterment are you going to do other than your current DE? Well, if you get an LED, you're going to see some plant characteristics that are going to be favorable, but you might not see an amazing yield difference, though you might shave down some of your wattage. So if you have a few lights, maybe not a big deal. You have a commercial garden, it's a commercial viable fixture, and you vetted it with your phenotype, you vetted it with your cultivation process to be a betterment over your fixture, then go ahead, go for it. But it's very particular to what your scenario is.
What are the Monster Gardeners asking for?
Well, they started out asking for LECs, and then of course, like you both had said, everything's about trends. So, double-ended started coming on the market, and people just lost their minds for it. But the only problem with double-endeds, especially in a residential output, is the ceiling. So I mean, if you're throwing a double-ended fixture up, you're going to have at least 40 to 46 inches. And so if you have lower than 10-foot ceilings, a lot of people don't realize that's not a good application for that light. It's similar to what you were saying. What are you trying to get out of your growing experience?
And if you're dimming your DE down, then you did a really bad job of pairing your product to your scenario.
Absolutely.
It's a Band-Aid.
I can't even, it's almost when they came out with the dimmer on DEs, they basically told me that they were selling to the wrong customer base purposefully, and they gave them a seatbelt or airbag for driving without a seatbelt.
Well, Steve and I were actually talking about this the other day when we were talking about how greenhouses really began and how much they've evolved over the years with adding supplemental lighting. And, you never see a greenhouse dimming their lights. You never see a greenhouse raising or lowering their lights. How commercial greenhouses work is they are working on banks. If you have, let's just say, 36 lights, you have, 3 different banks of 12, let's just say. You're never going to be running up and turning down everything. You're never going to be raising and lowering everything. Anytime you dim or overdrive your ballast, or overclock your ballast, you're putting strain on your ballast and your bulb.
Yep, big time. Fluctuates the spectrum quite a bit.
I think that's quite possibly because the average consumer just doesn't understand what a ballast does and how complicated a piece of electronics that is. It's basically juggling kittens high on catnip. It's crazy,
It's constantly keeping itself in spec from going out of spec and completely destroying itself. It's why they have such a high failure rate with the ballasts that don't have such large brands behind them.
It's a complicated piece of kit. What it actually does, I mean, I would love to hook one of these up to a full, test rig, looking at all of the various inputs and outputs and watch it balance. Because the current, the amps, the power that's coming, the electrical grids, depending on where you are, it doesn't know what it's got to deal with. It just has to try and balance it all. And we know, from my limited time over here, the quality of power across the country is just...
Yeah,
it's oil and water sometimes.
Well,
I mean, it's out there.
It changes completely. I mean,
well, that maybe that's why they came out with the double-ended 277-volt magnetic ballast recently. There was a company that actually released a 277-volt magnetic double-ended ballast.
Jeez, I don't think we carry a single magnetic ballast for the last 5 years.
No, we pulled them off our shelves.
Yeah, that trend kind of lost traction.
It was funny because it's one of those naked kind of style too, which has an extra kind of vibration going to it. Yeah, don't let any water hit the ballast. But it's interesting because that again goes back to the example that the lighting companies are just preying on the gimmick nature of the industry.
There's old school growers coming off the hills. They have magnetics. What do I know?
I know magnetics. Sell them easily.
Oh, my buddy's killing it with double-ended. Might as well marry the two.
Yeah. It's also funny too because it's like...
That sounds just like the reason to have for a double-ended metal halide to me.
That's hilarious.
It's exactly the same. Hey, it might work with metal halide. Let's have a shot.
Try it.
I would hate to say it, but the lighting companies that existed in this industry before are being strongly challenged by the real lighting companies moving in, and with the industry shift as we're seeing it right now, we're seeing a really fantastic opportunity for some great lighting technologies that maybe were not in our industry before, just not developed yet, and it's really been this plant potential that has created the focus for that development. And how cool is that? How cool is that?
After the next round of legal process here over in the States, then let's say half the country potentially could have recreational marijuana here. That all of a sudden, big lighting companies, they're going to start paying a lot more attention. Because at the moment, in horticultural terms, it's small fry. Tiny percentage of the amount of plants that grow.
They're starting to adjust.
Jumped out?
I would imagine so.
Yeah, years ago.
Years ago, Philips didn't want to, to my knowledge, Philips didn't want to be involved just because it was not necessarily a niche market, but it was an unknown market, unknown territory. If I remember correctly, it was before Colorado even passed recreational, and it was just, they didn't really feel like putting their toes in.
But this is it. You see the greenhouses in Europe, they're massive.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
They're enormous, and they don't see any lights moving there. I don't see it.
Can I throw out another recent lighting introduction? Additional spectrum to T5s. That's been an interesting one.
Yeah, that one's kind of funny.
Wait, what?
Yeah, so recently we've seen a number of T5 companies release T5 fluorescent bulbs. Not a new technology, now enhance the spectrum of these T5s. You've grown under red, blue T5 bulbs before. We've even done color configurations, or let's say configurations of red, blue between. I've grown crops under. You see definitely a little bit of a plant response difference there. But now we have an even better color assortment. And all I can say is if you are currently a grower and you're staggering your bulbs from a white to a red configuration, maybe you have an 8 light T5 and 2 of them are blue and the rest are red during your flower process. I think that's a fun process. I think
that makes sense.
I think that's fun. I think playing around with that is really fun. Now, adding different spectrums, I think that's fun too, but production-wise,
commercially viable, like you said.
It's fun. I would say fun. It's more fun than anything, but I definitely...
I sold a couple hundred to a frat party once.
You mean the actual fluorescent, the squirrely one?
Oh, no, like T5.
Screw and socket. T5.
But yeah, no, T5s are phenomenal. The first time I ever flowered, I flowered under, it was 2-foot 4 bulb T5s that were hanging in my closet in like a teepee formation over one plant. And you know what? It came out great, and it was a blast. It was a fun time.
But imagine if they were purple.
Right? If they were purple, I actually don't have any idea of what would happen.
Maybe you're growing a purple plant under that purple bulb. Oh wait, shouldn't it be reflecting all that light?
Yeah, so it wouldn't be needing it.
I'm kidding. Can I tell you guys a recent circumstance that I was able to see with LED lighting?
Yeah.
So I had this friend that had a test area in his house. He was doing some genetic selection. He was doing some selection of different varieties of plants. And so he had these different grow chambers. He had all these different grow tents in his house. And because he had these different environments, he was trying to keep them separate. He was doing selection of different varieties. And when he had a variety that had a little bit of a problem, and so he wanted to clean his tent out in between that cycle, so he went ahead and used some really heavy-duty hydrogen peroxide, at 30%, and cleaned it. From what was described, he said it started eating at some of the clear coating in the tent, and it was really awkward. He realized he wasn't going to use that again. Well, he kept growing. A couple days later, noticed the plants in that tent were doing very well that he had planted the plants into. And he called me up and said, "Hey Ryan, I'm having this issue and I'm not noticing it anywhere else, and I'm feeding him all the same stuff, same everything." And we went down the gauntlet of the different controls. And I asked him, can I come over? And he said, "Yeah, no problem." So I stopped by a couple days later. Things got a lot worse. And he's like, "I'm glad you came by. My plants are almost dead." And I looked in, and they were. And I looked at the plants that were near it, and they were perfectly healthy. They looked exact. And really quickly, I asked him some questions. I saw these weird kind of marks in the tent, and he bought a no-name brand tent off of eBay. All of his tents were fine. He had name brand tents everywhere, but he had this one tent he bought, and it was off-gassing. He had a VOC off-gassing. So his plants were turning yellow. They were curling over. It wasn't overwatering. It wasn't underwatering. They literally were dying. And we know what VOC looks like. You can see it in the leaves. It's that strong yellowing. It's not veining, and it's just quickly curling. So I went ahead and told him, okay, this is what I would recommend doing. I think it's something in this environment. I have a feeling it's VOC. I don't have a meter on me, so I can't test the VOC here, but I do have a meter at home. I'll bring it to you in a few days. So we went ahead and took that tent, we took it out of the area, took it away, took the plants out, and then he went into his other large tent that had a full spectrum LED on one side, I won't name the brand, another red-blue LED on the other side, I won't name the brand either. And he went ahead and put the plants, because he couldn't fit them in the tent under all one light, so he split them between the two. He was growing 2 varieties in that tent he was doing pheno selection on that he moved, and he split the varieties equally just to see the result between the 2 lights. So I come over with my VOC meter just a few days later, and he says, "I really want to show you something." And I'm like, okay. So I go in, and we do realize it was VOC. It was getting off-gassing the tent. So again, don't buy no-name brand grow tents. And when I mean no-name brands, ones that aren't carried in the major stores. And when I mean major stores, not eBay, I mean an actual retail store. So anyway, so we went ahead and tested it, looked at the plants. The ones that were under the red blue LED were slightly perking up, where the ones under the full spectrum LED were almost completely snapping out of it. And I told him I'm going to come back in a few days because I just want to see this if this continues. So I come back. Now it's been about a week since he's pulled them out. The plants under the full spectrum LED are completely rebounded. And those are two varieties, those same two varieties, the same soil, the same nutrients, same everything, pulled out of the same area, put into the same new environment, just two different lights. Will look like the ones that were, about 3 or 4 days before it. So the red blue LED, primarily growing, I don't see a problem. But when your plants are stressed out, I have seen in this circumstance, and this is just in the circumstances, this is my control, just this circumstance, but I did see a significant difference in this plant's rebounding. And I spoke to him on the phone earlier today, still consistent. The ones under the full spectrum actually have new growth. They look beautiful. The ones under the red blue LED are almost at the health of the plants were 3 days in. So red blue LEDs, they could take 2 to 3 times as long to rebound a crop that has problems. But again, that's when problems occur. But that's kind of an interesting, kind of...
No, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely something to like. But, a lot of secondary plant responses that come from the broad spectrum over narrowed spectrum. And we feel like that's what we noticed there. We saw a lot of secondary plant responses to bring that health back a little bit faster. But definitely some interesting information. And the controls there aren't great. The fixtures did have a different design philosophy from compact to a little wider. But this gentleman's a good enough grower that he can quantify things pretty well. We do trust his what he states most of the time. We can see it ourselves, of course. So
cool, man. Maybe you can keep an eye on that and talk back in the next time we get together for this.
I almost want to stress plants out under different LEDs and see the rebound, but a lot of controls have to be in place from environmental to phenotype to soil to what you're feeding them and everything.
One of the very first reflectors that I ever saw on the market was the parabolic reflector. They were often a white. They're white. Basically it allows for a very even reflection rather than what we're now seeing as common as the aluminum, 96% German pebble aluminum. More refraction, less reflection. Is how I like to classify it because it bounces the light in many different patterns to reduce hotspots. The white pattern are nice because they run a little cooler. The problem is they aren't as reflective as the German aluminum. Which brings me to what I noticed the other day is I'm seeing some new lighting products coming out trying to take existing products and taking the aluminum away. And
are you talking about the double-ended in the wing?
Yes.
Okay, I saw the same thing.
It was odd. I couldn't fully wrap my head around it. And when I did a little more research on it and I figured out what the reasoning, at least what I'm speculating is the reason is because it's for the double-ended wing. Obviously, we know the double-ended lamps run a little warmer. They're designed more for the compact fixture. They're designed for the specific reflectors that we're seeing them on the market, at least the leading market brands.
So what you're saying is they've knocked down...
They knocked down the reflectivity so that way it can run cooler.
So we went from a pebbled, refracting, highly reflective reflector to a white powder coat, 93%.
I'm sure it looks really sexy with your white walls and your white trays and your white outfit, but it's not performing the same.
And I know why you get upset about it because you're in the commercial cultivation realm. So you see that, you're like, no.
Right.
That is...
Makes no sense.
Well, a wing is taking, but we've measured 8 to 12% of the light and shoving it at the walls because it has no side caps, So if you're going for a wing to begin with, you know that you're probably in a small garden, like a grow tent, and that light's just bouncing everywhere, so you don't care. But if you're in a large room, even a large bedroom, you're going to be getting a good light loss to your walls. And it's kind of funny because then you have a DE on top of it, which is not typically going to be a grow tent type.
It was odd.
Yeah.
I get it. I understand, but it's right. We were saying earlier, it's giving into the market and people getting excited about something gimmicky. Nowadays we're getting leading lighting manufacturers launching low-profile fixtures. I mean, the PL-LP is a great example of that. You can use their alpha reflector. It's a low ceiling height reflector. It's got a 7.5-inch tall ballast. It makes so much sense for that application. It has a dimmer.
Yeah.
Of course, dimmers aren't ideal, but I'd rather use a lighting manufacturer with 68% of the global lighting market than using an inferior reflector
You don't
technology.
have to use the dimmer.
No, you don't have
No,
to.
exactly.
Don't even use
Exactly,
Touch
but
it,
it's
yeah.
but it's there. You might as well have the
Tear it
leading
off,
lighting
right?
technology. I mean, it makes total sense. Or even the small room reflector from Gavita. I mean, that is a funny add-on, but
Okay,
it makes sense for
well-
those grow tent applications.
I think it's funny to see a company that was in the greenhouse world actually moving to the hobby world.
Right.
And, we see another company doing the same thing, and it tells you that there's just a large residential cultivation market out there, and they're really trying to address that market and provide lighting products for them. And, it's hard because, their design philosophies were always commercial, and now they're moving into design philosophies they don't quite understand.
Right.
And that's always interesting as well. But, that is that's an interesting parallel you gave, because it's interesting to see lighting companies that are small trying to create a technology that's advancing and leapfrogging, and then you see large lighting companies that are heavily invested, like PL, in commercial systems and starting to create more hobby opportunities,
making
more
residential
residential
fixtures.
opportunities. And that's because there's a large residential cultivation market, but the problem is they don't want to support those cultivators. They typically don't like to provide the customer service because they're ag companies. And so, if there's an issue with, maybe a status light being stuck on something, maybe they'll send you a sticker instead of actually doing a recall on the product line. So, there's a lot of baggage that comes with working with an ag company that doesn't know how to service the residential market. And we've seen that with these large lighting companies as well.
Yeah.
And that's about where we ran out of time for this first light conversation. Now, since this was recorded, Santa Claus brought us a full in-car GoPro and sound setup, so all of the light conversations from now on are going to be mobile. But for now, my name's Dr. Watt, and until next time, thanks for watching.